There is no better time to own a PlayStation 3 than in 2024. Despite various servers going offline and no one outside of Sony knowing when they'll pull the plug on the service, the console still remains strong 18 years later, bringing in well over 1 million active users daily. So this begs the question, what games are the supposed 1 million plus users still, well, playing? Since Sony has not publicly provided any sort of metrics or information regarding this, I spent the past 2 months testing well over 100 PlayStation 3 games with online multiplayer. All of the research was conducted both during the week and on the weekend. All of my testing was conducted in North America. If you happen to live outside this region, then your mileage may vary in finding others. Since this is a rather extensive list of games, I included each one as a chapter as well as this handy infogram for each game to make it even easier for you. Also, if there's any titles that I missed here, please let me know in the comments down below. With that out of the way, this is the most active PS3 online games in 2024. But before we begin, I just want to give a quick shout out to the following people who made this video a possibility. From the PlayStation Reborn Destination Home and Little Big Planet Union Discord channel, Garfield, Skittle, Lee Wheelman, Alex, Toro, M88 Youngling, Snuzz, Butter, Not a Trend, The King is My BF, Xander_Beck, and Yuva.ebuild, as well as fellow content creators Bitter Roman, Lag HD, Dorian D, and Unsolist. Thank you guys so much, it's greatly appreciated. To kickstart this video off, let's start with the Call of Duty series. During the PlayStation 3 era, we saw about 11 games in the series release, all of which are still online as of the recording of this video. The most active Call of Duty community on the PlayStation 3 has to be Call of Duty Black Ops 1. Its player base is large, both in PvP and of course zombies. The community here tends to play a variety of objective-based game modes, like Capture the Flag and Search and Destroy. Meanwhile, it's not uncommon to find the odd game in hardcore team deathmatch. I like to describe it as taking the best aspects from World at War and infusing it with the foundation that Infinity Ward left with Modern Warfare 2. Oh, and you can also dolphin dive, which never gets old. Then you have World at War, which just so happens to be one of the most actively played games as well. Its player size has gotten much smaller in the past few years, but if you stick to game modes like Team Deathmatch, there's a good chance you'll find a near full lobby most of the time. One cool aspect about World at War is that it's the only Call of Duty game on the PlayStation 3 to offer a cooperative campaign. I managed to find one other dude on a Saturday night, and we got the chance to play through some of the game's levels. And of course, Zombies is still popping well into 2024. The same can be said about the Modern Warfare series in Black Ops 2. I wouldn't say one has more players than the other, as all of them still retain a healthy player population. It mostly boils down to whatever your personal preference is. That being said, both Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 2 are not accessible to some players. If your PlayStation Network account was created past 2018, Modern Warfare 3 simply won't let you matchmake anymore. This doesn't seem to affect the survival mode at least, which is pretty damn underrated if you ask me. Black Ops 2's issues range from giving you a black screen to the multiplayer freezing whenever you try to log in. Thankfully, there is a way to bypass this, as fellow content creator Destroying Insanity made a tutorial which I used for this video. I'll leave a link in the description if you come across this issue. Back on topic, Call of Duty Ghosts also has a player base surrounding it too. This game has quite the mixed reception among fans alike. Despite that, it still doesn't affect the player base, as I had no issues finding a near full lobby in Team Deathmatch. Hell, even its extinction mode still has a decent amount of people playing it. Call of Duty Advanced Warfare is also somewhat active, but not nearly as much as it used to be. You see, back in 2021, you could find a ton of different lobbies on any given day. In 2024, however, it's become a lot less likely. Out of all the active COD games on this list, this is the only one where I had to wait almost 5 minutes just to find a match. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's dead nowadays, just not as popular as it once was. Call of Duty 3, on the other hand, has seen a bit of a surge of interest surrounding the game. The community here is very small, but thanks to Ryan's recent video covering the PlayStation 3 Online, it's given the game a lot more attention. Majority of the player base exists on this Discord channel called Call of Duty 3 PlayStation 3, which hosts weekly game nights every Saturday. I've been to a few, and usually there's around 8 to 12 players that show up, which is more than enough for this game. It's unlike any other Call of Duty game you've ever played before, and definitely worth checking out if you've been sleeping on it. Finally, we both have Black Ops 3 and Call of Duty Classic, Quake. Starting off with Black Ops 3. This is hands down one of the worst ways to play this game, but despite its rough edges, it still routinely brought in a small but dedicated community. Well, sort of. Within the past year, something happened, causing it to become completely broken. If you hop into PvP, it'll give you a tutorial and require you to spend a token on one of the specialists. After spending the token, it'll cause the game to instantly freeze. What this means is that if you have a new account or you're new to the game, you no longer can play PvP matchmaking anymore. This also extends if you want to unlock a weapon, as that will cause the game to freeze too. I would have loved to talk about this one, but since I created a new account, I no longer can play this again, which, to put elegantly, is pretty That being said, zombies seems to be unaffected by this issue, as I could still matchmake and find others without any issues. So there's that, I guess. Last but certainly not least, Call of Duty Classic is essentially a ghost town nowadays. I checked this one multiple times throughout the week and the weekend to no success. I did find one lobby on a random Sunday night, but the dude was AFK for over an hour. This is a real shame, as this game is essentially a time capsule to where the series originally started. Moving on to the Battlefield series. Now, there's currently only 3 Battlefield games still online as of the recording of this video, due to EA deciding to kill both 1943, Bad Company 1, and Bad Company 2 back in December of last year, which really sucks. That being said, Battlefield 4 is still going strong. Now, Battlefield 4 expanded and improved on the mechanics laid out by 3 while offering a wider range of weapons and equipment to unlock. The combat is a lot more approachable and feels more refined than its predecessors, and of course, the sound design here is top-notch. Since it supports the ability for players to host their own servers, there's a nice variety of different ones to choose from, each with their own presets and variations of existing game modes. This is hands down the most actively played Battlefield game on the PlayStation 3 and continues to bring in new players daily. The same can also be said about good old Battlefield 3. If you had to compare 3 and 4, both were excellent Battlefield games, but personally, I've always preferred the maps in 3. Maps like Operation Metro or Caspian Border still holds up as some of the best in the entire franchise. I'd say that the player base is slightly smaller than 4, but not by a significant margin. I did a community post about this video, and a lot of you mentioned that you still played this one, so it's fair to say you'll find someone if you decide to revisit this gem of a game again. Then you have Battlefield Hardline, the black sheep of the franchise. Instead of fighting in a modern war, Hardline takes more of a TV show influence, adopting a cops and robbers type of setting. It did a lot of things differently compared to 4, like toning down the destruction mechanics, but made up for it in the expansive list of attachments for your weapons and some rather fun equipment to use, like the grappling hook. The community here is still active, but much smaller than 3. I recommend sticking to playing this one on a weekend for the best results, as during the week, it was not nearly as active. It might not be the best in the series, but considering what the Battlefield series looks like today, it's a pretty damn good game if you ask me. Up next, we have the original Destiny. Being released 10 years ago, the original Destiny is one of the only MMOs still online on the PlayStation 3. I decided I would install it once again and check out the PvE portion of this game. I first started by walking around the social hub. I came across a lot of people just chilling and going about their business. It was kind of surprising, as you wouldn't expect to see so many people playing this version of the game. I even got invited to a fire team by a few friendly folks, but unfortunately I couldn't participate as I didn't have the DLC installed. Although I did have luck finding people in the social hub, I didn't seem to come across anyone else in any of the planets. This might be due to where I was in the story, or I might have simply just didn't notice them in the game's world. Going back to the original Destiny reminded me on just how good it felt to play. It's snappy, polished, refined, and offers a great amount of depth if you dig deep enough. This version of the game is essentially a time capsule to where the series first started and is perfect for any fan of first-person shooters. Moving on to the Rainbow Six Vegas series. Best described as a tactical first-person shooter with a cover-based system, it's still one of the most rewarding multiplayer games on the PlayStation 3. Let's start first with Rainbow Six Vegas 2, which happens to be the most active out of the series. During my testing, I'd found a few matches in PvP both during the week and on the weekend. There is a bit of a skill gap if you're new to the series, as the game nowadays is mostly played by people who've been around since launch. That being said, the community community here is more than accommodating and patient, which is a major plus. If that gets too much, then there's also a cooperative mode called Terrace Hunt, where you and up to 3 others have to traverse through various levels, with the objective being to eliminate a set amount of NPCs. What makes this mode truly special is that the AI is incredibly sensitive to your surroundings, and will find various ways to outflank you if you're not careful. On top of that, Vegas 2 offers a full-on level progression system, with all the weapons unlocked by default. There's also a nice amount of clothing options to truly make your character stand out. So you might be asking yourself, what about Rainbow Six Vegas 1? Unfortunately, it's not active anymore. Outside of organizing a match with fellow content creator 2ZipHell Tomorrow Man, I've yet to come across another player since the summer of 2023. I plan on doing a community game night and would like to give this game more attention. So if that's of interest, please let me know in the comments down below. In short, if you want to revisit the Rainbow Six Vegas series, stick to the second one if you want the best results. Next, we have Payday 2. If you've never played a Payday game before, it's a cooperative first-person shooter where you and 3 others are tasked with planning and performing various heists. The game gives you a nice amount of scenarios to choose from. One of them had myself and my teammate tasked with sneaking into an art museum from the rooftop, while another had us going guns blazing straight into a nightclub. I really enjoyed just how replayable each mission was. It always seemed that every time I'd revisit it again, I'd come across different pathways or find better ways to approach it. The community surrounding Payday 2 is also quite active. It didn't seem to matter what day of the week I would test it on, as I had no issues finding a full room. So what about the original, Payday the Heist? Unfortunately, this game is pretty much dead nowadays. Moving on, we have the original Minecraft. A game that doesn't need an introduction. Minecraft on the PlayStation 3 is still quite active in 2024. Minecraft's player population exists in its various game modes. Although I found players in every minigame, it seems that people prefer both the battle and glide game modes, as I would routinely come across near full lobbies a lot more often than I would in, let's say, Tumble. Now, admittedly, I've never actually played any of these games before, but if I had to choose a favorite mode, battle hands down was the one that I enjoyed the most. It's really chaotic and quite stressful, especially when you have no sweet clue of what you're doing, but it was so addicting that I came back to it multiple times just to play a few more rounds. If you're feeling more nostalgic, Minecraft on the PlayStation 3 is a great way to revisit where the series first started. What PlayStation 3 list would not be complete if I didn't mention Killzone 2. Being considered one of the best looking games on a home console at the time, Killzone 2 still retains a somewhat small but active player base in 2024. The combat in this game is unlike any other shooter. There's a good amount of weight to all your actions, meaning you don't aim or move nearly as fast. Instead, it forces the player to slow down and take more of a cautious approach in gunfights. I dig this aspect a lot as it gives each weapon its own unique characteristics while separating itself from other games in its genre. Since its server revival, thanks again to PlayStation Rewired, you can generally find between 10 to 20 players during peak hours. That being said, Killzone 2 still remains as one of the best first-person shooters on the PlayStation Triple. Then, you have more obscure titles, like Resistance Fall of Man. The original Resistance released alongside the PlayStation 3 back in 2006, and offered a rather competent online suite for its time. It took inspiration from other arena shooters from the 2000s, while offering a mixture of both large to small scale maps that can accommodate up to 40 players in a single lobby. In terms of a player base, it's not large by any stretch, but does still have a decent amount of players playing it daily. The community hosts a game night every day from 4 PM EST to 12 AM, which usually brings in about 8 to 12 players at a time. If you prefer more of an old school shooter type of vibe, then Resistance is for you. Up next, we got Bioshock 2. This might come as a surprise as the series is best known for its single player campaign. However, Bioshock 2 offered a rather underrated multiplayer mode that's still being played. It takes influence from other shooters by giving you both a level progression system and a loadout that you can customize to your liking. Since it's set in the Bioshock universe, you can expect to come across a mixture of firearms, like the handy shotgun, and of course, good old plasmids. In addition to this, Bioshock 2 lets you hack various objects in the game's world, like a turret or planting a bomb inside a vending machine. I found that most of the lobbies nowadays exist inside the Capture the Sister game mode, as the other ones were pretty much dead. It's refreshing, original, and doesn't detach itself too much from the single player experience. If you still have a copy of it laying around, definitely give it a shot. Not all first-person shooters on this list are hyper-competitive. Take for instance the Sniper Ghost Warrior series. If you've never played a Sniper Ghost Warrior game before, it's essentially like Sniper Elite, but in a first-person perspective. The original game has more of a jungle-like aesthetic to it, with the maps giving you more foliage to hide into, while the second game has more of an urban influence to it. One map that I played on is set between two apartment complexes, giving you the option to use the available windows or balconies as a vantage point. Both Sniper Ghost Warrior games still have an active player base surrounding them. The only times I would find matches in either of them was generally on the weekend. It's an underrated series that honestly doesn't get much attention nowadays. If you're burned out by modern first-person shooters, then give the Sniper Ghost Warrior series a try. Last month, a group going by the name PlayStation Reborn was able to fully restore Far Cry 2's multiplayer. Unlike other first-person shooter games that I've talked about so far, Far Cry 2 offered a rather unique feature with its built-in map editor, allowing people to create their own levels and share them over the internet. This addition cultivated a community that to this day still continues to pump out some of the most creative and inventive maps. Anyways, in terms of player size, it's still small but showing signs of growing every day. The community does host events weekly, which tends to bring out a lot of people. If you get bored of Call of Duty or want to try something different than just Battlefield, then why not give Far Cry 2 a try? Moving on to an even more obscure game on this list, we have Enemy Territory's Quake Wars. Quake Wars is a game I never thought I'd see brought back online. It's a large-scale class-based first-person shooter set well in the Quake universe. Whenever you spawn into the game, you're given multiple roles that you can play as, with each one providing additional benefit to your team. This also expands to the amount of vehicles that you can drive. You can drive things like a quad, a boat, as well as a Hummer. It's a bit too early to say how active it truly is, as it was just brought back online, but I could definitely see this one bring in a small but dedicated player base. Judging by the reactions we got from the Discord channel, it seems that a lot of people really enjoyed this one. If you don't mind a lot of jank and you want to play a game that isn't Battlefield, then Quake Wars might just be for you. Moving on to another game that time forgot about, we have Wolfenstein. Considered a reboot of the franchise, the 2009 release was the last Wolfenstein game to offer a competitive PvP multiplayer mode. When you first jump into the game, you're greeted with a selection of classes and loadouts, each with their own particular weapons that you can use. The combat in Wolfenstein is kinda goofy. Sometimes you can land a kill with ease, while other times it just feels completely off. I don't know if this has to do with the latency or the host's connection, but it became quite noticeable during my time with this game. Like is the case with Quake Wars, it's hard to judge just how big the player base currently is. I managed to attend 2 community events for this game, and each one had around 6 to 10 players at a time. So I'm led to believe that over time, the community does have the potential to become much bigger. Next up, we have, Haze. Haze set out to do a lot of things. Being best known for marketing itself as a Halo killer, Haze didn't exactly set the world on fire quite like Sony had hoped. That being said, it does offer both a cooperative campaign as well as a competitive PvP mode. The main mechanic in Haze revolves around this drug called Nectar. Throughout the game, you must keep refilling your nectar to stay alive and not lose your mind. If you take too much of it, your guy goes completely apeshit. Believe it or not, the community still plays this game every Saturday. I had the chance to attend one of their sessions to try the game out, and honestly, it's not that bad. Calling this game a Halo killer is rather disingenuous to say at least, but there's still a lot of fun to be had here. Now for something completely different, that being Call of Juarez Bound in Blood. This is a game that I honestly didn't expect to find so many people playing. I decided to try this game out on a random Wednesday night, and to my surprise, I found 5 random players in a lobby. For those who have never played this game's multiplayer before, it's almost like an arena shooter that's set in the Wild West. There's a selection of pre-made loadouts that you choose from, with each giving you different weapons. One is called the Miners, which gives you both a sawed-off shotgun and a stick of dynamite, while another one is called the Native, giving you both a bow and arrow, which is basically a one-shot kill if you can manage to land a shot with it. Straight. The player base here is rather small, as I tested this one a few times afterwards and simply couldn't find another lobby going. That being said, Bound in Blood left a positive impact when I did get the chance to play it, and I would love to revisit this game again. Sneaking its way onto the list, we have Metal Gear Online. MGO is an online experience unlike any other game you've probably played before. On one hand, it's a tactical third-person shooter that requires an extensive amount of knowledge to stay on top of the leaderboards. On the other hand, it's also quite silly. Since being brought back online by the nice folks at Save MGO, Metal Gear Online still brings in around 50 plus players daily. This project also supports custom-made community maps and crossplay with the PC. Some might find its difficulty curve to be rather off-putting, as it's not the easiest game out there. There is plenty of guides and tutorials to help you start out and beginner servers that make the experience much better. It's truly a special game that I'm forever grateful that we can revisit again. Then I decided I would check out Unsault Peace Walker's multiplayer. Now, I've heard rumblings that this game still has an active online community, so I decided I'd go investigate for myself. I tried multiple times both on the weekend and during the week, and unfortunately, I simply couldn't find anyone playing Versus Ops. Your luck might just be better than mine, but it does seem to be kinda dead nowadays. If you'd rather fly aircrafts than hide in boxes, Warhawk has you covered. Being an early PlayStation 3 title, Warhawk is another large-scale multiplayer shooter that gives you the ability to fight both on the ground or participate in dogfights up in the sky. Since its server revival, thanks to the wonderful folks at PlayStation 1, it still brings in a healthy player base. I found that weekends brought in the most amount of people and highlighted just how chaotic this game gets. If you're a fan of the original Battlefront games and don't mind the occasional grenade spam, then Warhawk is definitely worth giving it a try. One of the most original games that EA has published in the past decade was Plant vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. Taking inspiration from both the Battlefield series and Call of Duty, Garden Warfare is a PvP team-based shooter set inside the Plant vs. Zombie universe. Like many games in its genre, it offers various classes to choose from, ranging from a goofy pea shooter plant that shoots seeds at people, to a zombified football player that sends a barrage of pig skins out of a machine gun. The community here is just as large as it was when I checked last year and doesn't show any signs of slowing down anytime soon. It's one of those games that sounds dumb on paper, but once you give it a chance, you can see why it's played so often. If you're looking for more of a kid-friendly game, then this is a great one to choose. The next title I decided to test was Grand Theft Auto 4, best described as a giant sandbox where you and up to 15 other players can run around and cause as much destruction as possible. Free roam tends to be where the majority of people hang around nowadays. It's easily one of the most enjoyable modes in this game, giving you all of Liberty City to explore while allowing you to adjust a ton of in-game options, like turning off the police and adjusting the amount of traffic. There's also a nice amount of places that you can explore, like visiting Nico's apartment and the infamous swing set glitch. Grand Theft Auto 4 also offers a ton of PvP modes. You've got your typical run-of-the-mill modes like Team Deathmatch, as well as some rather unique ones, like Cops and Crooks. Cops and Crooks puts a player between two different teams, the Crooks and the Cops. The Crooks are tasked with having to escort their boss to an extraction point, while the police are tasked with stopping them from doing so. It's a lot harder than it sounds, and always ends up being a complete riot. Grand Theft Auto 4's player base is also still active in 2024. The community does have its fair share of hackers nowadays, which can be pretty annoying, especially when they freeze your console on you. Despite all of that, it's still one of the best open world online games that you can play. This is also the case with Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar not only managed to carry the experience over to the Wild West, but expanded on it and made it even better. Just like Grand Theft Auto 4, free roam remains the most actively played mode. Red Dead Redemption's map feels bigger than Liberty City, with a wide range of diverse locations to explore. You can travel to the small town of Armadillo and get into gunfights with other players inside the local tavern, or you could form a posse and take on one of the dozen gang hideouts spread across New Mexico. My personal favorite thing to do in Red Dead's multiplayer is to travel up the tall trees. There is this cabin that's nested deep in the woods, surrounded by cougars and bears. The cabin is fully enterable and it's a great spot to hang out with a few of your friends. If that isn't enough, there's also a host of PvP game modes. For my testing, I was able to find a few lobbies and Capture the Bag, which is Red Dead's take on Capture the Flag. But the best mode in this game has to be Undead Overrun. This is a survival-based game mode that's very similar to Call of Duty Zombies. Instead of purchasing weapons off a wall, you choose from a selection of pre-made loadouts. Each round becomes progressively more difficult, requiring you to play as a team and not venture off on your own. This is just scratching the surface on just how much there is to do with this multiplayer. It's basically Grand Theft Auto Online without any of the pay to win or flying car nonsense. Moving on to the Resident Evil series, a lot of the Resident Evil games are still online with a sizable following keeping them alive. Let's start with the most popular out of the bunch, that being Resident Evil 5. Using the server browser, I came across a bunch of cooperative open lobbies to join. This also extends to the Mercenaries mode, which is a PvP game mode where the player needs to fight off a horde of zombies while fighting each other. It's kinda awkward given the fact that Resident Evil 5 requires you to stop and shoot, but eventually you get the hang of it. Meanwhile, Resident Evil 6 does have people playing it, but it's a lot smaller compared to 5. I did manage to find a few matches in co-op on the weekend, while during the week I struggled to find anyone playing the game. Afterwards, I hopped into Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City to see if that was still being played, and to my surprise, it's still active well into 2024. Operation Raccoon City both offers a cooperative campaign and a PvPvE mode called Team Attack. It's essentially team deathmatch, with the map being flooded with zombies. Having to account for both zombies and the other team trying to kill you kept things interesting. I found the assortment of firearms that you can unlock had me wanting to play more just to check them out. The player base surrounding Raccoon City is small and tends to stick to hosting games during the weekends. It is a decent alternative to the mainline Resident Evil games as long as you can keep an open mind. If you want something even more tactical and slow paced, look no further than Sniper Elite 3. As you might have guessed based off the name, Sniper Elite 3 puts you in the role as a marksman, with the game revolving around sniping at a distance. Each map is large in scale and offers avenues for yourself and your team to take advantage of. Sniper Elite also provides you with a nice arsenal of rifles to choose from, each with their own unique traits and recoil patterns to account for. There still is a lot of players who play this one daily, as it's not uncommon to come across a full lobby, especially on the weekends. In short, Sniper Elite 3 is a great choice if you want to try something different than your typical third-person shooter. While I was at it, I decided to check out Sniper Elite V2. Unfortunately, this one seems to be much less active nowadays. Despite multiple attempts, I simply couldn't find anyone else playing this game. Fellow content creator leg_HD did upload a gameplay video of it not too long ago, so there's a good chance that there's still players playing it and you might have better luck than I did. The next game up was Transformers Fall of Cybertron. Set in the Transformers universe, Fall of Cybertron offers an array of competitive PvP modes that puts the player against each other, either playing as the Transformers or the Decepticons. Each team has their own classes that you can play as. I played as one called the Titan, which is equipped with a chain gun, a spinning sword attack that causes a tornado, and transforms into the ship that has this big ass cannon attached to it. Combat also stands out here as it meshes both on the ground and vehicular gunfights effortlessly. It's refreshing, easy to understand, and just plain fun. Being another PlayStation 3 title that was brought back online, this time by the folks at Transformers Re-Energized, it still brings in a moderate-sized community. It's not nearly as active like it was when I checked it last year, but if you stick to weekends, you can generally find a few people still playing the game. Moving on, we have the original Watch Dogs. Released late in the PlayStation 3 lifecycle, Watch Dogs was an open-world third-person shooter set in the city of Chicago. Now, Watch Dogs does multiplayer slightly different. Instead of joining a lobby, the game gives you the option to evade someone's session. From here, you take on the role as a hacker, who is tasked with finding another player on the map, breaking into their phone, and then successfully stealing their data without getting caught. It turns into a giant game of cat and mouse and can get pretty intense. The community surrounding Watch Dogs is also active, as I had no issues finding someone to hack during my time with this game. Since you can get invaded even in single player, it opens the amount of people that you can attack. Watch Dogs also does offer both a racing and trailing mode, although despite my best efforts, I couldn't find anyone playing these game modes. Next up, we have SOCOM Confrontation, a series we don't really hear much about nowadays. Confrontation took the foundation laid out by its PlayStation 2 counterparts and attempted to modernize it and make it a lot more approachable. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it was better than the originals, but it did a fine job at capturing the core experience that made those games so special. Confrontation includes various fan-favorite maps from the series, like Frostfire, while including its own original levels. If you want more of a hardcore tactical experience, then I recommend sticking to the Demolition servers. If you want something more casual, then there's also a few team deathmatch servers that are not nearly as sweaty. Being another game revived by PlayStation 1, the community here is still quite active. I spent a lot of time with this one last month, and honestly, I really enjoy my time with it. While we're on the topic of forgotten about multiplayer games, Warhammer 40k Space Marine comes to mind. Taking place in the 40k universe, it took inspiration from games like Gears of War while meshing melee combat into the mix. Last year, I talked about how the community was still active surrounding this game. After revisiting it again in 2024, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. According to fellow content creator Bitter_Roman, the player base is split between two different Discord channels that still meet up from time to time. Roman does organize his own weekly community game nights on 40k on his PlayStation 3 Space Rating Discord channel. They had an event recently that brought in a lot of players, which is always promising. I'll leave a link to his channel in his Discord in the description. If you end up struggling to find a match outside the events, its single player is just as good and is worth purchasing just to play on that merit alone. Up next, we have Tomb Raider. The 2013 reboot of the franchise offered an atypical PvP multiplayer experience that you'd come to expect from most AAA titles back then. Since the Uncharted games are no longer online, Tomb Raider basically took its place and offered a rather janky but similar experience. Tomb Raider offers both a level progression system, the ability to customize your loadouts, as well as a handful of character models to play as. I like how some of the maps in this game give you a good amount of verticality to them, giving you the option to use parkour or use one of the available zip lines. The game still has a moderate-sized player base who plays it weekly. I found that I had better luck finding people in both free-for-all and TDM. You can find a lot of the players on the Space Rating PlayStation 3 Discord channel. They host a lot of the community events surrounding this game in the Xbox 360 version too, which is pretty cool. Late last year, a team going by the name PSREBORN revived various PlayStation 3 games back online. One of those titles happens to be Splinter Cell Double Agent. Double Agent offered a multiplayer mode called Spies vs. Mercs. One team is tasked with playing as the spies, having to sneak around the map and steal data from various terminals, with the mercenaries being tasked with having to stop them from doing so. It's incredibly fun and requires a decent amount of communication if you want to stay on top. The community here is very small but plays on occasion. I would recommend joining our Discord channel and arranging a match from there for the best results. While we're talking about Ubisoft games, Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2 was also revived by the same team and has a small but active community as well. GRAW 2 either gives you the option for cooperative play or competitive PvP. Co-op tasks the players with having to complete a set of objectives, such as planting a bomb or successfully taking out a VIP. The AI in this game doesn't mess around and will take you out if you're sloppy. PvP on the other hand provides its own challenge, as the time to kill is very quick. It reminded me a lot of the older SOCOM games. Just like Double Agent, your best bet is to stick to the Discord channel to arrange some matches. Word of the wise, the PlayStation 3 port of this game is a little rough around the edges, but if you can tolerate a lower frame rate, it's more than playable. Afterwards, I decided to check out Splinter Cell Blacklist. Just like Double Agent, Blacklist offered its own take on Spies vs. Mercs, as well as a cooperative campaign mode. Initially, I thought this one might have been dead, as Ubisoft said they were going to shut down the servers, and then they didn't shut down the servers, or now they're still up, I don't know. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anyone playing Spies vs. Mercs during my time with this game. However, I did find someone in co-op. In this mode, you and your partner are tasked with completing objectives, such as hacking a laptop, or eliminating a certain amount of hostiles. The game rewards you with a bonus if you can complete all of it while being stealthy. I haven't played Blacklist in a long time, and going back to it, it's actually pretty damn impressive on just how well graphically and mechanically it's held up. It could have easily passed as a game that released 5 years ago, not 11. If you want a fun cooperative game to play with a buddy, it doesn't really get better than Blacklist. Alright, so the next game isn't a third-person shooter, rather a top-down real-time action strategy game called Fat Princess. Being developed by Santa Monica Studios, best known today for the God of War series, Fat Princess offered a rather unique spin on the action RTS genre. Each team is tasked with various roles that they can play as. Take for instance the worker class. They can cut down trees spread across the level and build structures with it, such as a bridge for example. There's this cool mage character that can cast spells on the people, and a ranger who can shoot fellas from a distance. Fat Princess also offers some rather silly game modes. One of them was called Rescue the Princess, which requires each team to steal each other's princesses and bring her back to your castle. Then you got Queen's Rule, which basically is just a game of soccer, but a lot more violent. The player population in Fat Princess is rather small, with most matches having around 3 to 5 players based on the matches that I could find. This really isn't a big deal since the game will fill any empty spots with bots, so it always feels like you're in a full lobby. Fat Princess is a game that, despite not taking itself too seriously, offers a great amount of depth to its gameplay and promotes working as a team. It's an experience that any PlayStation 3 owner should at least try once. If you fancy more of a cooperative game versus PvP, then there's still quite a few that remain active to this day. Let's start with Dead Space 3. Now, Dead Space 3 stripped away the survival horror element from 1 and 2 and replaced them with more of an action-oriented gameplay setting. One of the biggest changes was the addition of being able to play for the game cooperatively. This changed the game from having a spooky horror-like aesthetic to resembling more of an Army of Two type of experience. During my testing, I had no issues finding an open lobby. It does require an online pass, which thankfully you can still download for free on the PlayStation Store. Although it might not have been the best game in the series, I think the cooperative mode is slightly underrated nowadays. It's a great game to play if you want something to do on like a Saturday afternoon or something like that. Chopping its way onto this list, we have Dead Rising 2. Dead Rising 2 is unlike any other zombie game you've played before. Since the game takes place inside a mall, you have a handful of different shops that you can loot. The amount of items that you can pick up and use as a weapon is extensive, ranging from a sledgehammer to throw in a bottle of shampoo. On top of this, you can drive a host of vehicles, like a golf cart and my personal favorite, the dirt bike. Anyways, the community surrounding Dead Rising 2 is very active. I tried this one multiple times, and no matter what day I would play it on, I'd always seem to find a match each time. It's a really enjoyable time, especially with a friend, and it's easily one of the best cooperative games on the PlayStation 3. Dropping straight into this list, we got Helldivers. Released at the end of the PlayStation 3 lifecycle, the original Helldivers was a top-down cooperative shooter that support both crossplay on the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Vita. Each mission spawns you and your squad on a planet with a set of objectives to complete. This includes having to capture a base, sending a bomb straight into a hive, then needing to successfully extract afterwards. Since the camera is from a top-down perspective, it forces everyone to stay together and work as a team. Also, friendly fire is on by default, which always ends well. The OG Helldivers still brings in a stable player base. I had no issues finding an open lobby no matter what day of the week I was playing it on. I strongly recommend playing this one if you like to, or if you happen to have a PlayStation Vita lying around. Up next, we have PlayStation Home. Best described as a social MMO-like experience, PlayStation Home is basically the console equivalent to games like Habbo Hotel. It gives you a bunch of worlds that you can explore. These range from chilling out in your apartment, hanging out at a bowling alley, to attending one of the various events held by the community. Speaking of which, I was invited to one of those community events, which just so happened to be a birthday party. At first, I kinda stood there awkwardly, while everyone else danced, until I eventually figured out how to do the robot. Everyone here was super nice and made me feel welcomed. It's definitely one of the best online communities that I've ever interacted with. Also, happy birthday, Amy. The player base here is very active. It's not uncommon to come across 30+ players during peak hours. Most people tend to play this game on a weekend, but if you're lucky enough, you might find the odd game during the week. PlayStation Home also supports crossplay with the PC as well, which is always a plus. Special thanks to the wonderful folks at Destination Home for their assistance with getting me online. One of the most slept on titles on the PlayStation 3 has to be Journey. It was an adventure game where the player has to partake on a massive journey to reach the mountain in the far distance. Journey did multiplayer in a rather unique way. There isn't a lobby or matchmaking service here. Instead, you come across random people throughout your playthrough, with each player only being able to communicate using body language and signs. Although I wasn't able to spend enough time to find another partner on my journey, it's still possible to find someone here, as Sony has not shut down the servers for this game as of the recording of this video. I highly recommend trying this one out, as there's no other game quite like it to this day. If we're gonna talk about cooperative games, then how can I not mention the Little Big Planet series? All of the PlayStation 3 Little Big Planet games have been brought back online by a team called Little Big Planet Union. I asked around on the Little Big Planet Union Discord channel on what was the most actively played game in the series. According to a few of their Discord members, Little Big Planet 2 is the most popular out of the bunch. There's still people playing both 1 and 3, but it's not nearly as often. Speaking of Little Big Planet 2, it offers an enormous amount of custom maps made by the community, all of which support 4-player co-op over PSN or in split screen. If you plan on playing any of these games again, you will need a PlayStation 3 running CFW or HEN, as unmodified consoles, as of the recording of this video, will simply not work. Anyways, the Little Big Planet series is a perfect game to unwind and express your inner creativity. Now, let's change it up and start talking about fighting games, starting with Fight Night Champion. It was a boxing game released way back in 2012 that took more of a grittier take on the genre. It's best described as a grounded experience that puts a heavy degree of realism both in its setting and gameplay. There's a good amount of moves and counterattacks that you can perform, with a deep roster of iconic boxers to play as. The community surrounding Champion is still going strong well into 2024. Despite whatever day I would log in, I'd always find at least someone else to box with. Although I couldn't stand a chance, I still enjoyed my time with this one and highly recommend it if you enjoy the sport. Moving on to Tekken 6. Tekken 6 is an arcade fighting game that's being kept alive by a small but passionate player base. Now, this is the first time I've ever played a Tekken game before, so I decided to jump in blind and attempt to figure it all out on the fly. I quickly realized that that wasn't such a great idea. Tekken is not for the faint of heart. It's not as easy as it looks and requires a lot more investment of your time if you want to stand a chance. During my time with Tekken 6, it appears that most people stick to rank modes over player matches. Although I struggle to find players in my region, it does let you search worldwide, which definitely helps out a ton. If you want more of a challenging fighting game, then Tekken 6 might just be for you. Since we're on the subject of arcade fighting games, Ultra Street Fighter 4 is another popular option in the genre. Considered by fans of the series as one of the best street fighting games in the PlayStation 3, Ultra boasts a wide roster of over 20 characters to choose from. As a newcomer to the series, I found this one to be one of the more approachable fighting games on this list. The controls feel right and offer a nice amount of depth for those who are looking for more complexity in their fighting games. In terms of player population, it's still very active. I had no issues finding someone in the ranked playlist. It's also worth mentioning that everything here seems to run fine too, with no real issues with lag or anything like that. Just like was the case with Tekken, I would strongly suggest to stick into ranked play modes, as unranked were not nearly as popular. While we're on the topic of Street Fighter, I decided I'd also check out Street Fighter 3 Online Strike. It's an arcade port of the original Street Fighter 3 with various online and quality life improvements, released digitally on the PlayStation Store. At first, I didn't expect to find anyone, but within 5 minutes, I actually did. The ping was kinda high, but we both were able to play successfully. If you still happen to have this game downloaded on your hard drive, it's definitely worth revisiting again. Moving on, we have Marvel vs. Capcom 2. If you've been living under a rock for the past 2 decades and never had a chance to play this classic, it's a 2D fighting game that meshes both iconic Marvel and Capcom characters. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 offers something for everyone. If you lean more into the hardcore fighting game genre, it delivers an exceptional combat system that's backed by layers of depth for you to immerse yourself in. On the other hand, it's also very approachable for people looking for more of a casual experience, as the game is very easy to pick up and play. Since this game is being delisted, I didn't expect to find anyone. To my surprise, I ended up coming across 6 other players on a random Thursday night. Although this version of the game is pretty good, I think I still prefer the Dreamcast port, especially with the MF Doom Remix mod. If none of these seem appealing to you, then maybe GOW Ascension might just do it. I feel like a lot of people simply forgot this game even had a multiplayer mode, and not for nothing, it's pretty damn fun. It takes the combat found in the single player while meshing into a top-down arena setting, with up to 8 players ripping each other apart. I found that the multiplayer was a little difficult starting out, but it does give you a good amount of tutorials to familiarize yourself with the game's controls. Anyhow, you can find a game here with a few others during the weekend. I don't recommend trying this during the week, as I found it wasn't nearly as consistent. If you want to try a different type of fighting game, then GOW Ascension might just be for you. Now let's move on to sports games, starting with Virtua Tennis 4. Virtua Tennis is still one of the most actively played sports games on the PlayStation 3. It takes more of a simulation approach, having more of a realistic take on the sport than, let's say, Mario Tennis. Every second counts, and it's definitely a game of patience, something I'm not necessarily great at. That being said, it's still a very enjoyable tennis game. Best played during the weekends, it's perfect for anyone who's looking for a sports game to play. Slamming head first onto this list, we have Skate 3. The skate games were always an incredible time. They not only captured the essence of skateboarding so well, but did it in a way where it felt new and refreshing to play. I'm glad to report then that Skate 3 is still very well active in 2024. Free Skate tends to be where a lot of people hang around nowadays. In this mode, you and up to 5 other players can roam around various different parts of Port Carverton. It gives you a handful of maps that you can choose. Personally, I've always found luck using the stadium maps whenever I wanted to find more players. I did try a few other ones, but I didn't find them nearly as consistent like the stadium map was. If you want more of a competitive experience, you can still find lobbies and spot battle from time to time. I recommend sticking to playing this one on a weekend, as that's when I found the majority of people in this mode. In short, Skate 3 is an excellent sports game that's aged like fine wine. If you were gaming in the 2000s, there was a good chance you might have played SSX Tricky. It was a snowboarding game that took inspiration from the likes of 1080 snowboarding while giving its own take on the radical sport. The SSX series had a short-lived revival back in 2012, and surprisingly, there's still people playing it. On the night that I had the chance to test it on, I found one other player shredding on some mountains. Although my time with this game was brief, I did notice that SSX gives you a ton of tricks to pull off. One of the main gameplay hooks revolves around its combo system, which rewards you with more points the more creative you are with each trick. It kinda reminded me of that Shaun White snowboarding game from back in the day. According to a post I found on Reddit, there's still quite a few people who play this from time to time, so there's a good chance you'll find someone online. If you're looking for a game to play while you're bored, then SSX is a good one to try. Speaking of Shaun White, I've just received word while making this video that Shaun White Snowboarding has also been brought back online thanks to the team at PSREBORN. It's an open world snowboarding game that takes a similar approach to SSX, leaning more on the arcade side than being a grounded realistic sim. Shaun White's multiplayer puts you and up to 15 other people on a giant mountain, with a 100% freedom on whatever you want to do. If that gets boring, the game also allows you to get in some snowball fights. Since it just got released 2 days before this video is supposed to drop, I have no sweet and sour clue on how big the player population is just yet. That being said, this is a perfect game to unwind, relax, and hang out with a few of your buddies. Now let's move on to racing games, starting with Ridge Racer 7. Ridge Racer 7 is a game I never expected to show up on this list. Being a launch title on the PlayStation 3, I originally thought there wasn't anyone still playing it. However, that's not the case. In Japan, there's a community of players who still play this game weekly. I had the chance to play with one dude going by the name Team Z, where we spent a good half hour racing across a bunch of different tracks. Speaking of which, a lot of the tracks encourage you to drift around them, which is quite easy to pull off in Ridge Racer 7. On top of this, there is a built-in chat functionality. It gives you a bunch of pre-made responses and emoticons, such as a smiley face and a dude taking a literal Regardless, this is a great choice for any racing fan, and not for nothing, this game still holds up incredibly well. If you fancy a racing game with more of a Mario Kart influence to it, then why not give Sonic and Sega All-Star Racing a try? It takes the best elements from Nintendo's IP while replacing it with beloved Sega characters. You got Sonic, Tails, Billy Hatcher from that GameCube game, and of course, Shadow the Edgelord Hedgehog. Unlike Ridge Racer, Sonic All-Stars gives you power-ups that can be used against each other. These range from tripping on LSD, causing this giant rainbow to take up your screen, to throwing homemade missiles at each other. Anyways, I was able to find at least 2 other players on a random Thursday night. From additional research I did while making this video, I did notice a few people mention this title, so I'm led to believe that the community is a lot larger than what I was able to find. If you're looking for more of a laid-back, silly racing game, then why not give Sonic and Sega All-Star Racing a try? The next game I checked out was Need for Speed Most Wanted. I was a big fan of the 2005 Most Wanted and never really had a chance to play the 2012 reimagining of the game, so I thought now might be the perfect opportunity. The game's controls are similar to the older titles, with an influence from the Burnout Games series, especially when you crash into things. I love the amount of diverse locales that the map has too. One minute you're cruising down a highway in the middle of a canyon.
You're listening to Mach 3 FM.
Then the next minute you're trying to avoid traffic while drifting around various city blocks. It always felt that there was something to see and worth exploring. This game still routinely brings in a solid player base. Like is in the case of many other games I've talked about so far, it's best to stick to playing this one on a weekend for best results. Up next, we have the original Grid. Being yet another game brought back online, Grid is a racing sim that offers a nice range of licensed cars and tracks taking place across the globe. Players can choose from a host of different game modes, one of which has doing laps around a Grand Prix, while another one was a giant drift competition, with whoever can land the most amount of sick drifts winning the game. The community surrounding Grid is small, with the majority of players hosting games from the PSREBORN Discord server. It's an enjoyable, realistic racing game that any fan of the genre would enjoy. Next, we got Burnout Paradise. Being one of the last main entries in the ill-fated franchise, the Burnout series is best known for its fast-paced nature and its rather impressive car destruction physics. Paradise was just revived thanks to the folks at PlayStation.org. I tried this one a few times and I was able to find a few others playing around in free roam. Word of caution, you're going to need to port forward your internet connection in order to play online again. If you don't do that, it'll still let you join, but within 2 minutes, it'll eventually kick you out of the game. That being said, if you can manage messing around with your router's settings, it still holds up as one of the best open-world racing games on the platform. Smashing its way onto the list, we have Gran Turismo 6. Now, I pride myself on testing every single game on this list. However, I had to make an exception for Gran Turismo 6. Despite downloading a 16GB update, which took well over 6 hours, it simply wouldn't boot. Turns out, if you update the game using the XMB, it also somehow manages to break it. I even went for the length of installing each update manually, and that still didn't fix it. This is a real shame, as judging based on the Discord channel at least, there's still a ton of people playing this game online. It also appears that the community hosts events daily, so there's always something to get involved with. If you happen to have this game still installed on your PlayStation 3, connecting to the private server is very straightforward and easy to do. I'll leave a link to their Discord channel in the description down below. Before we end this video, there's a few more games that supposedly have online communities surrounding them, some of which I simply couldn't find other players in, while others I simply didn't have enough time to check, starting with the Borderlands series. Now, I tested both 1 and 2 on various different occasions. Each time I tried it, I failed to find any sort of open lobby or signs of any other players. It's best to arrange a match beforehand if you want to play co-op nowadays. This is also the case with Dead Island. In last year's video, I mentioned that I did find at least one other person in co-op. Despite my best efforts, however, it doesn't seem to be active anymore. This is a real shame, as this is definitely an underrated gem, at least in my eyes. Speaking of zombie games, both Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2 seems to be dead nowadays. If you want to find people to raid with, I recommend asking around on the PlayStation 3 Online and LAN Discord channel. Blur is another title that I failed to find other people in. It was revived via private server not too long ago, and best of all, it doesn't require a modified console to play. I was hoping to find at least one person here, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. If you're interested in revisiting Blur, I'll leave the DNS that I used to connect to the server in the description down below. Since we're talking about racing games, MotorStorm was another game that I simply couldn't find others in. I do know that there is a sizable player base that does play this game from time to time, I just couldn't actually confirm it myself. I also checked the Lost Planet series, starting with Extreme Conditions. I did have luck finding one dude from Japan on a random Thursday night. Whenever I went back to this game after this session, I simply couldn't find anyone else. I also checked Lost Planet 2 a few times and couldn't find a single person there either. In last year's video, I mentioned that the Assassin's Creed games still have an active community of players. I was curious to see if that's still the case in 2024. I first tried Assassin's Creed 3. Things started out promising until the game simply wouldn't let me connect due to issues with Ubisoft servers. I found one post on PSN profiles that was made back in March confirming that it indeed shut down this year, which is a real shame. I then decided to try Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and although it allowed me to matchmake, I simply couldn't find enough players to start a match. That's not to say that I didn't find others, as I would come across the odd player here and there. Then we have Diablo 3. I simply ran out of time making this video, and unfortunately I couldn't check this one. If I had to take a guess, considering how popular the franchise still is, you're bound to find at least 1 or 2 people here. So what about Grand Theft Auto Online? Well, there was a server revival by the folks at Grand Theft Auto OG, however that was shut down a few months ago. Thankfully, not all hope is lost, as another revival project known as Grand Theft Auto RV is set to release next month, fully restoring Grand Theft Auto Online back to update 1.27. Once it drops, I'll let you guys know in a future community post. Big shout out to Mystic Joker XD for letting me know about the existence of this project. It's greatly appreciated. And that was the most active PS3 online games in 2024. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This project was overwhelming to say at least, and there's bound to be some games that I missed. Please let me know in the comments down below if you know of any. Also, if you made it this far, I just want to say thank you so much for watching my video. I've been working on exploring dead Dreamcast and Xbox 360 online games. I also want to do a few community streams on the PlayStation 3 during the month of June with you guys. I'll let you guys know in a future community post once I figure out a date that works for everyone. Anyways, if you enjoy this style of content, please consider leaving a like or even a subscription. It's greatly appreciated. Hopefully this next project doesn't take over a month to complete. But until next time fellas, peace.